In the 4th century BC, the Greek world was a collection of fractured, bickering city-states living in the shadow of the massive Persian Empire. Then came Philip II. He took Macedonia, a vulnerable backwater on the northern fringes of Greece, and engineered it into a highly unified military powerhouse. His signature innovation was the Macedonian phalanx. By equipping his men with exceptionally long pikes and training them to move as an impenetrable wall of shields and spears, Philip created a tactical unit that quickly dominated his neighbors. But in 336 BC, just as he was preparing to turn this army against the Persian Empire, Philip was struck down by an assassin. His death left a dangerous power vacuum at the top of the state. The crown fell to his 20-year-old son, Alexander. He didn't have to build the massive Macedonian war machine from scratch. He inherited a fully primed engine of conquest. The machine simply needed a new driver. Alexander had been molded for this exact role. Physically, he was thoroughly hardened under the fists of stern veteran soldiers. Intellectually, his brilliant mind was sharpened by the personal tutoring of Aristotle. But his real drive came from a romantic obsession with the poetry of Homer. He carried a copy of the Iliad everywhere, driven to emulate Achilles and surpass the towering legacy of his own father. Here is where we run into a major historical problem. Despite his fame, every single first-hand account of Alexander's life, the royal diaries, the memoirs of his generals, has been completely lost to time. To understand his rise, we have to rely entirely on writers like Arrian and Plutarch, who lived centuries later and tried to piece together the narrative from those now-lost documents. The Alexander we see today is a composite, a figure reconstructed from layers of ancient propaganda and secondary memoirs that must be carefully peeled back to find the historical man underneath. Almost immediately after securing his throne, Alexander pointed his inherited army east, launching a direct assault against the seemingly invincible Persian Empire. This map shows his campaign's geographic scale. He marched across the Granicus River for his first major victory in Asia, pushing onward to crush King Darius at Gaugamela. After taking Babylon, he drove his men through Central Asia to the furthest fringes of India. He maintained a record of never losing a single battle. He led cavalry charges personally from the front, relying on absolute fearlessness and tactical flexibility. Against any external military force, the Macedonian engine proved it could not be stopped. But covering 2 million square miles of territory put an immense internal strain on both the army and the conqueror himself. To govern his holdings, Alexander began integrating Asians into his administration and adopting Persian court customs. This cultural shift deeply alienated his core Macedonian loyalists, who felt he was abandoning his roots. The battlefield victories gave way to growing internal paranoia. This tension culminated in a drunken argument where Alexander murdered his own general and close friend, Clitus, an act he instantly regretted. The scale of his success warped his sense of reality. He demanded his subjects treat him differently, ultimately claiming a mixed human and divine nature. Finally, deep in India, his exhausted men reached their breaking point. They successfully mutinied against him, forcing their undefeated king to finally turn the army around. The physical army conquered the known world, but the psychological toll corrupted its driver. It created internal fractures that no amount of military brilliance could fix. In 323 BC, back in the city of Babylon, the 32-year-old Alexander fell suddenly ill and died after a brief fever. He left no capable heir. Without him, the Macedonian Empire shattered. Surviving generals carved the territory into rival kingdoms. As these kingdoms settled, they exported Greek language and institutions into the East, initiating the cultural fusion known as the Hellenistic Age. A state built entirely on the forward momentum of a single conqueror cannot survive his demise. When we look back at Alexander, it's easy to judge him by modern standards, but projecting our own moral expectations onto antiquity obscures the reality of his time and place. His choices were rooted in the hard values of his era, a world that prized physical performance, demanded absolute loyalty, and the accumulation of honor. Almost immediately after his death, his legend outgrew his historical reality. Over the centuries, his life was fictionalized and translated across cultures, appearing in highly embellished medieval texts like the Alexander Romance. That ancient tradition of myth-making continues today, shaping our modern historical fascination and cinematic interpretations of the Macedonian king. Alexander's final, most durable conquest was the romantic myth he left behind, an immortal narrative that outlived his empire and fixed itself in the collective memory of human history.